afternoon, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to spend a few minutes with you here today. And I thought we had a pretty good turnout here today, so especially coming out on kind of a dreary day out here today. So I appreciate you guys coming out, especially on fall break, and opting to learn a few things about what's happening in the real estate market. So do I have any realtors here in the room? I know I've got a affiliate member back there that we work with, but are there any realtors in the room here today?
There
got one here? Okay, great. I knew we'd have at least one realtor here, so I'm glad. So if I say anything wrong, make sure you call me out, right? So, but no, I appreciate very much the opportunity to be here today. So I'm going to give you some updates on what's happening with the real estate market and housing, not only here in Martinsville and Morgan County, but also just what's happening here generally in central Indiana. And also talk about some of the challenges and opportunities that we see related to what's happening in the housing market, what it means to our communities, what it means to jobs and economic opportunity here in Martinsville, the county, and the region, and how we can maybe address some of those challenges going forward. You've all heard mixed things, I'm sure, in the news over the last couple of years about everything that's happening out there. So we'll hopefully share a little bit about all that. You know, let me turn the lights off real quick, if that's all right, so you can see this. Peter, sorry if I'm going to mess up your photography a little bit with that. Can you guys see that a little bit better now?
Yes, thank you.
And before anybody tries to take a bunch of notes or pictures, I did want to say that Jamie's recording this, and we're also going to have the slides all available on the website as well. So all this information, you'll be able to dig into a little bit more. And I'm more than happy to dig into anything more after the meeting today. If you guys have questions about anything in particular you want to get into, I'm happy to get in there. But also as we go through the presentation, if there's anything that you want to ask questions about, feel free to jump in any time. Don't feel like you have to wait to the end. But just a quick little bit about myself and the organization that I'm representing here today. So if you're not familiar with the MIBOR Realtor Association, we're a professional trade association for realtors here in central Indiana. We've got about 9,500 members currently, give or take a few. And we cover 12 counties here in central Indiana. So we cover Marion County, the surrounding counties, plus Montgomery County, Crawfordsville, Decatur County, and Brown County, down to the southeast. Did I say Decatur County? So anyway, 12 counties. So most of central Indiana is what we cover. So we provide a number of different services to our realtors. We're very concerned about making sure that we're engaged in what's happening within the marketplace and our communities, and hopefully adding to what's happening in our communities to help our communities thrive, because that's really important to a thriving real estate market, obviously. So I think we have a common interest in making sure that we're all doing well together here in central Indiana. So for myself, just a little bit more about, I've been doing this for 27 years now for the association. My job, and good job on the advocacy comment there. I know you practiced that beforehand, so everybody always gets tripped up on that word. But my job is to really work with local elected officials throughout the 12-county area, and also working with economic and community development organizations within the region, really working to make sure that we keep a pulse on what's happening with local regulations that could impact real estate and homeowners, planning and zoning, those types of things. So keeping track of what Gary's doing over here to make sure he's keeping things going here for the community and helping Martinsville thrive and so forth. So working with a number of different organizations throughout that time. But I also have my graduate of IU and also completed the Oklahoma University Economic Development Institute. So those are kind of my areas of specialty. But enough of that, let's dive into what's happening in the marketplace right here. And so you've been hearing, I'm sure, in the news quite a bit about what's happening with prices, right? Home prices have been going up and up and up over the last several years. So here in the central Indiana area, when we refer to the MIBOR BLC service territory, that encompasses all the counties. They're part of our listing service here in central Indiana. So if you just think of central Indiana when we're talking about this, this is really what we're talking about. But the median sales price now for a home in central Indiana is $254,000. As you can see by that graph there, it's been going up at a steady pace for several years now, and it's gone up quite a bit from what we're historically used to here in Indiana. Usually in Indiana, we saw things kind of just continually creep up at 4 or 5% over the years, but we've seen an escalation of those prices, and we're going to talk a little about why some of that is here in just a minute. But you can see we've had a slight increase from last month, and from a year ago, we are up almost 13% from where we were just a year ago. And if you go all the way back to 2016, the median price was $138,000 or right around in that category. So just during several short years, we've seen that price escalate tremendously across the region. As far as what's happening here a little bit more locally in Morgan County, same things happening. Overall, median price is a little bit lower than what it is for all of central Indiana, but to come in at $234,000 for the county. That's up 4% from a month ago, and up almost 10% from a year ago. So just like we've seen across the rest of the region, those prices have steadily just gone upward over that period of time. Getting a little bit more local here, and you'll notice that the graph becomes a little bit more bouncy, as we kind of call it. That's because there are fewer numbers to look at, so that the graph becomes a little bit more erratic. But still, I think you can still see the general trend is still an upward migration in that sales price. The median sales price here in Martinsville currently is $205,000. It's down slightly from a month ago, but again, when you're looking at a smaller group of numbers, that's not uncommon to see it kind of go up and down a bit. But from a year, we're up 8% almost from a year ago. So very similar to what we're seeing in the county and the region as a whole. Those prices are continuing to go up at a steady pace. So as far as closed sales, the number of product homes that have been sold in the region, again, this is all central Indiana during the month of September. There were 3,645 homes sold across all of central Indiana. That was down slightly from last month, and down slightly from a year ago. But still, things are closing at a really steady pace and continue to increase yearly. In Morgan County, for September, there were 133 homes that were sold. This is up 23% from last month and up almost 10% from a year ago. So the pace continues. The demand is still very strong out there for homes here locally as well. If you look at active inventory as far as the number of products we have available for sale right now, this is where you're going to begin to see some of the pressures on the market come up. So here in Morgan County, there are currently, at the end of September, there were only 89 homes available for sale. That's down tremendously from where we've been historically. So you can see going back to 2016, that number has gone consistently just down and down and down. We keep thinking we're going to hit the bottom of that. We were thinking that a couple of years ago, we couldn't possibly go any lower, but that number keeps creeping lower and lower. So again, adding tremendous pressure on the market. You saw earlier there was a lot of demand. When you have a lot of demand and not very much product out there, that's what's causing prices to escalate very quickly. It's a very competitive market out there. If you talk to any of our realtors, you'll hear stories about how fast the market is moving, how competitive it is, and how difficult it can be for buyers sometimes to secure a home. So As far as new listings, this is another challenge to the marketplace too. This graph's a little bit harder to follow, but what you can see in Morgan County, we had 120 new listings last month. On the previous slide, I mentioned we only have 89 currently available, so you can see that part of that's already sold this month. It's just the pace of the market is very, very fast, but generally what we're seeing happening over time is that that number is continuing to decline as well. So we're not adding enough new product to the market. So that's why we're seeing that available inventory continually shrink month after month, year after year, is because those numbers of new product being listed for sale continues to decline slightly every month. And so you can see we're down from last month. We were at 134 new listings, and a year ago we had 131. So again, those numbers just continue to diminish, and that's hurting our overall supply out there and making it more competitive. When we talk about months of supply, this is how fast things are being absorbed into the marketplace right now. In Morgan County, we currently have 0.7 months of supply. So if nothing new came onto the market, we would be sold out of all the homes in the county in a little over 2 weeks. That's how fast things are moving and how low the supply is. You can see the blue shaded area at the top. That represents what we consider to be a healthy real estate market. We typically have experienced and depend on about 4.5 to 5 months of inventory. That's considered a healthy marketplace. And we have been far from that for quite some time. And the numbers, again, just kind of keep getting lower. So this is what you're hearing about a lot. If you talk to realtors, how fast things are moving off the market. Product goes for sale, and sometimes we're seeing multiple offers in a single day, and products selling sometimes in hours. Sometimes, a lot of times, in fact, these offers are coming in at above list price and being accepted as is, without inspections and all kinds of other things you wouldn't normally see in a regular marketplace. So it's becoming really, really competitive, and so it's really making it tough if you're a buyer out there trying to find product really anywhere in the market. This, I will tell you too, the numbers that you're seeing here are not unique to Martinsville or Morgan County. We're seeing this again across the entire region and across the country. We're going to talk a bit more about why that is, but we're not normal for what we're seeing in other parts of the state and the country. So what you're seeing here is a reflection of what's happening in other places. This graph here represents cumulative days on market, and again, I talked about how fast the market is, just the velocity of how quickly things are moving. This represents both the average and the median days on market. For September, the average or the median days on market was 6 days. So things are moving very, very quickly. Typically, it wouldn't be uncommon for a house to be for sale for several months, and now it's likely to move within hours or a few days of being on the market. If they're not moving at that pace, there's usually some reason that they're not, but most of those are moving at a very fast pace. One of the things that we're really concerned about, especially with this marketplace, with the increase in prices, is the impact it's having on affordability. We know that buyers at the lower end of the market, people that are looking for maybe their first time home, their starter home or what have you, those folks are being squeezed especially hard during this competitive market because those prices are going up, but also the inventory in that category is shrinking as well because the prices are moving up. So if you take a snapshot of Morgan County, we talked earlier about the active inventory of, 84 houses, I think it was. When you cut that down and look at what's out of that whole pool of homes that are available within the county, how many are available at $250,000 and under? So really looking at those first-time home buyers and around that lower end of the price range, if you will. Actually, 250 is even high for a lot of people. But if you just do the cutoff there are only 38 homes currently available in the entire county below $250,000. So if you're a first-time home buyer, somebody on a lower income that is looking for a product on the lower end of the market, it is really, really tough out there, even more so than what you're seeing in the rest of the market. Question?
250,000 is a pretty high price. Is that what you consider the threshold for affordable housing? You're talking about first-time home buyers. I know
Yeah.
a lot of these kids got money, but
I'm gonna hit on that here in just a second, but I just kind of used the 250 as kind of a general cutoff, but that was a good question. So for here in Morgan County, I'll show it here, it's a little bit lower as far as what we think should be kind of the average, but yeah, so again, 250 can be too high for some people when we're talking about first-time home buyers for sure. So we just use that kind of as a placeholder to kind of general cutoff of the market. And you can see just the dynamics. If we cut that back to even, probably 200, that number's going to shrink substantially more. And so it just gets tighter and tighter the lower you get. So this is kind of related to all that too, what we've been seeing happening over the last several years. This graph is a little bit difficult and confusing maybe to read, but it basically breaks out different price categories of home sales by year. And so you can see the first group of bars right there is under 50,000. And the first bar you see, that purple colored bar, is 2015. And it goes up through 2021 across those colors. And then each category over basically jumps up about 50,000. So we move over to 50 to 100, basically 100 to 150, and all the way up to $1 million. What you'll notice, and the thing I wanted to point out here, is that during the earlier years, 2015, 16, and 17, the bulk of what we saw sell in the market was really in that 100 to 150,000 price range. But what's happened here in the last few years is that those higher prices now you're seeing predominant sales taking place at the 200, 250, even $300,000 mark. And what this is showing is that we're forcing the price of these homes upward in the marketplace over that period of time. So the types of homes that we're selling during this period of time aren't changing. We're selling the same homes out there in our communities over time, but what's happening is those price ranges are now getting ratcheted up. So the home that sold for 150 to 200,000 is now about 250, 300,000, and so it's moving the entire marketplace up a whole nother notch almost every single year, which again is putting tremendous pressure on those lower end buyers because the number of products available in those lower end price ranges is just becoming squeezed more and more every single year. When we look at the ongoing demand, that's one of the things that's kind of influencing prices and so forth. That's one of the questions we get. Is this? People ask often, is this a bubble? Is it something we're going to see, just kind of go away all at once? But we don't think that it probably is, because there's signs that there's still continued demand and other factors within the marketplace that show that this trend, we believe, has reason to really continue. We'll talk not only about this, but also about the supply side of things. But if you look at future demand, now the Gen Z and millennials now outnumber baby boomers and Gen X. And so what you're seeing is there's a whole other wave of potential home buyers just entering kind of that prime home buying phase of their life. And so you will see continued demand for future home sales. We're not seeing that diminish anytime soon. We also think there's some interesting things to really consider in here too, because a lot of these younger buyers are looking for a different type of product. A lot of them are looking for a smaller, more dense product a lot of times. And also you're seeing the same thing on the flip side of the market with boomers and some of your older Gen X are also starting to want to downsize and look into some of those more smaller, more dense, walkable type of products. So Could this really demand an entire different housing product in the future? That's something that we think we need to keep track of, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about here as well. But the point I want to make here is that the outlook for future demand of housing continues to be strong with our population trends across the region. And if we look what's happening with the growth in jobs across the region, this is from a study we did a couple years ago in partnership with the Builders Association. We hired Green Street and Lisa Strabon Associates out of Virginia to really look at how our housing is matching up with our economic development initiatives, because obviously if we're doing all this work to attract new jobs and people to the region, we've got to be able to house those workers, right? And so looking at the next 20 years, we know that if we look at projections for new jobs across the region based on what we've done over the past several years and look at some of the strategies put in place right now, we're expecting about 275,000 new jobs to come to the region over that 20 years. Breaking those down into household formations, that comes out to about 180,000 new homes are going to be needed to fill or to supply housing to those new jobs and that workforce coming to the region. What's happening on the flip side of this, now we're going to talk a little bit about new construction and keeping pace with that demand. As part of our study that we did, we looked at the pace of what's happening with new construction and keeping up with that demand for new product. One of the things that we found is that we've been severely deficient in keeping up with new construction to keep pace with that. So here in central Indiana, we're about just under 2,000 units a year short of keeping up with the demand that's needed for the growth here in the region. We need about 9,000 units a year across all of central Indiana to keep pace with the housing demand for new units. And then here in central Indiana, we've not been keeping pace with that. This again is pretty common too with what we've seen nationally, and it's one of the major reasons we're seeing this happen across the country with prices and the huge competition for product going up is because we saw about a 10-year lag in new construction not keeping pace with the market, and that was really due to the last housing crash we saw. During that time, a lot of construction companies went out of business. The labor force left new construction and went to other fields, and so it took several years for that industry to really rebound, and we've been severely behind. So every year that number continued to compound, and so that number of being deficient has continued to increase during that 10-year period. We're doing a much better job today. These numbers have kind of caught back up, but we've still got to make up for those past 10 years. So we really need to surpass that number here for a few years to be able to kind of fill that gap, if you will, of product needed in the region. And what happens when we're not keeping pace with the demand out there with new construction and filling that pipeline? It's, again, pressure on prices, pressure on the workforce to find housing they can afford. That then makes it tough on employers to find the workforce to fill jobs, and ultimately makes it harder for our communities and the region as a whole to be competitive in attracting a talented workforce and jobs to the region. So it really has a huge impact and a connection to our economic development efforts here in the region. So how do we fix all this? Besides just kind of building out there, we know that we've got to pay much more attention to some of the finer details. And so we know that new construction can also lead to a lot of controversy in our communities. We've seen it here recently in the county with several proposals that have come to happen in a couple of those communities that people had concerns about some of those products that were being developed. But I think that there's some common goals we can all get around when we're talking about new product for the region. I think one, whether you're a builder, a buyer looking for a new product, just a member of the community or an elected official in the region, we all want to build and sell quality, in-demand homes. We want to develop safe, desirable communities, and we want to create an environment that supports investment across the region. Unfortunately, we've had a lot of us versus them during that time. Like I just mentioned, some of the most recent proposals that have come before some of our local towns here, have been met with a lot of controversy. I want to just kind of share this message that we need to change that process somehow. We need to make it a more collaborative process so that builders, developers, city officials, and members of the community can work together towards those common goals that we've got out there, because we do have some huge challenges that impact all of this out there in the community. And we need to start thinking about housing in a much broader way. A lot of us only think about housing when we're at that moment where we're looking for a new home, right? We don't think about it the rest of the times of our lives, but we should be thinking about how does this impact the workforce in my community? Are there going to be enough workers working at the restaurant where I like to go and enjoy my Sunday brunch? Or are there going to be enough to fill the jobs that are needed to keep our tax base strong? Will our kids be able to afford to move back to our community? Will we have the type of product that will attract them to want to stay here, or will they be inspired to move someplace else that's doing things differently? These are things that we need to start thinking about when it comes to housing. So I think one of the messages I'd like to kind of share with people is that we need to think about what we want as a community. We need to make sure that all of our plans, our comprehensive plans, our planning and zoning, all those things are a reflection of what we want. So do we need apartments? Do we need more single-family housing? What type of housing do we need? We need to decide collectively as a community what we want our community to be, and then we need to stick to it, because what we see too often is that we know what the needs are. So for example, we know that we need more affordable product for people, right? Because we don't have enough at the lower end of the housing market. But then when that proposal comes from a local developer to build a home that could be afforded by people in the community, a lot of times we get a handful of local people that show up that oppose that project, intimidate the plan commission or the council into denying that project or changing it substantially where the price gets jacked up because they increase the size of the product or the lot or what have you, and we end up missing the mark on what the community really needs. And so those are the types of conversations we need to start having and really getting back to those points of being able to achieve the outcomes that we want. So it's not just possible for us to kind of build our way out of this, right? We've got to think a little bit more broadly than that. We've got to think about making sure that we have the right type of product and the right price of product as well in the region. So this is what's been happening here in Central Indiana. We've had this huge mismatch happening with what's being built and what people can afford. We're seeing the vast majority of new products being built across the region in all of our counties happening at the really high end of the market, while most of income levels across the region are far below where that is. And so this is something we've got to pay more attention to. This again goes back to that vocal group of people that shows up at the plan commission or city council meeting and objects to some product, and they want a nicer product to go on a more expensive product is usually what they're talking about, but we end up missing the mark on some of these. And so this really came to light. Green Street is a consulting group that helped us with this study. They first did a project for Noblesville that really caught our attention a few years ago, and they looked at everything that was built in the city of Noblesville over the past year. And this was about 5 years ago they did this study. But when they did that analysis, when they got done looking at all those projects, only 10% of the new products that were built during that past year could be afforded by the income levels within the community at that time. That is an unsustainable model long term, but that's happening, what we see again and again in all of our communities across the region. So we've got to figure out how to better match up income levels and home prices. And this gets back to your point a little bit here. So if we look at Morgan County, for example, the median household income is about just under $63,000 for the county. If we took, usually the standard that's used is 3 to 3.5 times your income level to find out what the price level of home. So if we took 3.5 times the median household income here in Morgan County, we'd be looking at about $220,000. So that's kind of what the median housing price should really be looking at. But again, I think that sometimes we're all kind of thinking that everybody's making way much more money than they are, and so we expect new home proposals to be at a much higher level a lot of times than those end up being. So,
question.
Yeah.
As I reflect on the first house that my husband and I bought, and our second house and our third house, I think when we bought our first house, we were probably bringing in about 72,000 a year combined. And I only felt comfortable mortgaging 107. Is 220, and I'm not pushing on the data, is 220 even realistic at 63,000 a year? That feels like a large mortgage to me.
yeah, and it could be for some people depending on what your overall expenses are. So as I mentioned, it's usually 3 to 3.5 times. So a lot of people will really look at that 3 times your income level to be at a more comfortable spot. And a lot of people today are pushed outside of this range because of how competitive the market is, and so they're stretching their budgets, and they're spending far over 3.5% on their mortgages for their homes just to be able to secure a home in this competitive market where prices have really been driven up. So then that puts tremendous pressure on families on where they spend their money for other things. How much do they spend on food and healthcare and extracurricular activities, school, and all that kind of things. So those are all very tough questions, but yeah, it's a good point. So another trend that we've seen kind of across the country, and this gets back to kind of the affordability, some of the conversation we're having out here today. If you look at what's been built in the country since about 1960, the number of what we call starter homes, that kind of first-time home buyer, lower end of the market a lot of times, that product has continually gone down and down and down, and so seen a tremendous drop and seeing a shortage of that starter first-time home buyer product really across the country. And here's another thing we need to think about as well. So when we think about housing, households in our community have changed substantially over the years, but we still continue to produce the same product out there. So the products that we continue to build in a lot of these new developments are still the same thing that we were producing back in 1950, 1960, of 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, whatever kind of the standard is. But households have changed significantly. So if you just look at the number of households that were married back in 1950, 75% were married. Today it's only 50%. As far as the number of households that were married with kids, it used to be 43%. Today it's only 20%. So those numbers have changed, but again, we still can build the same continual product out there. We have a lot of households that are single-person households. Our realtors will tell you they sell a lot of homes today just to a single person, not a family. We also have everything in between. We have multi-generational families and all kinds of mixes of households today, and our products aren't reflecting that household makeup today. So as we're thinking about a new product for our communities, we should also be thinking about how are households changing, and are we supplying the types of product out there to attract buyers to our community that fulfill their needs as well. And one other thing I wanted to mention too, we know that the investment in quality of life, both in housing developments, but also in our communities, is really key to buyers across the region too, more so than what goes into the house. This is a recent survey that we had, well, it's a couple years old now. We're getting ready to do an update of this, but this is from back in 2018, and you can also see 2012 results. But people far outweigh the qualities of the neighborhood or the community than they do the house itself. So people are looking for amenities like parks, trails, schools, community events like farmers markets. All those kinds of quality of life factors are becoming much more important to people and where they decide to purchase a home. So if I'm thinking about which community I'm going to buy my home in, I'm thinking about all those other things first before I'm actually thinking about the home. So as we've been out talking to people, we would encourage our elected officials, our organizations in our communities like chambers and others to really keep that front of mind too, and encourage you to invest in quality of life types of amenities for our community, because those are really key. And also, we've seen a huge dynamic and a shift, and we think this is going to continue into the future, into the type of product that people want as far as the density. And I know this is a huge lightning rod for a lot of developments today. And it's also a huge challenge for the new construction community too. With land prices going up and up and up, as they have been, because the availability of land to build new product on is becoming tighter and tighter. It's tough for builders to be able to get the numbers to work to make products affordable to the marketplace without having to increase some density. But on the flip side of that too, we're also seeing that buyers are interested in a much different product today. So almost half of the citizens here in Central Indiana that we surveyed back in this 2018 survey they did with the Metropolitan Planning Organization, half of residents here in Central Indiana, just under half, said that they were looking for a smaller, more dense, more walkable type of product where they could walk to stores, parks, and different things like that, as opposed to having to get into a car and driving to those features. So it's not the entire market, so we're not saying that everything that should be built out there should be a denser, smaller, more walkable type of product, but it's something that we want communities to start thinking about. And again, it's a huge lightning rod anytime you talk about density. People start making all kinds of claims without any factual data to back them up. Oh, it's going to lower my property values, it's going to overcrowd our schools, this and that and the other. But people are really looking for this product. As I mentioned, future demand, those younger buyers and even some of the older buyers today are also looking for that smaller, more walkable product. And a lot of people too just don't want the hassle of things like caring for a large yard anymore. But this is what we see again and again happen at city councils and planning commissions, is the push to get larger lots, larger square footage, when in fact the demand is saying something much different. And so we're not supplying this part of the market. So I had a question up there.
So you did your last survey, what, about 3 years ago or so?
Yeah.
So that's pre-COVID. And what we see a phenomenon now.
Yeah.
People are trying to get away from the denser neighborhoods and stuff, want some more seclusion based
Yeah.
on
No, I
social
think
distancing. So
excellent point. And we're going to we've scheduled to redo this survey again next year. So we'll be happy to come back and share those results. And we do think we'll see some changes in that. But I still think that even despite some of the things we've seen with COVID, we're just going to continue to see a strong demand out there for product. And again, one of the main reasons we want to bring this up is because this product hardly exists anywhere out there. So because it gets so much resistance whenever it gets proposed in communities, people make all kinds of false claims about not wanting. And we saw it in recent examples here. People all said that the proposals in Mooresville and a couple other places that were proposed here recently were all too dense, and they made some of the same claims. But buyers are looking for that product, and it also allows us to meet that goal of an affordable product to make the numbers work. When you look at the cost of land and the cost of housing today, sometimes you have to look at density as a way to do that. So again, we're not here to tell everybody that everything you build should be like that, but it's something you should be thinking about to meet that part of the demand. And I think there's other benefits too.
I think it goes to your quality of life comments. I think we still need the trails, the parks, the green spaces, because even, the walkability of all that, I think that's going to be key, why somebody wants to go somewhere. Everything you talk about is location, location, location.
Yeah, absolutely.
Regardless of what the dynamics are around the size of the home or who it is that's buying.
Absolutely. Good, great points. And I think this was one of my closing slides here, but as far as when we're talking about being smarter, more efficient about how we use our land and develop our new neighborhoods and so forth, I think there's a huge benefit too here for communities and local government to think about. There can be up to a third less upfront development and infrastructure costs to develop a more dense, more walkable type of product. We can save about 10% on the delivery of services. So when things are more compact, you don't have to go as far extending infrastructure. You don't have to go as far running your trash trucks and so forth. And so there's a cost savings there. You can generate 10 times the revenue with more dense developments. The thought was always that if we increase the size of everything and increase the price of it all, we'll generate more tax revenue. But you can actually earn more if you look at doing things more dense, and we can show you examples of that across the region and where people have done that. So something else, just again for cities to think about how this can benefit taxpayers and the community as well, as we look at being more efficient with our land use. And at some point, we're going to get to the point too, right, where we just don't have the land to keep developing, right? We can only continue to go so far with new development before we run out of money being able to serve that, being able to repair those streets again and again every 10 years or however often we do it, maintain those sewer lines and so forth. And so we've got to start thinking about some of this stuff long term. So I think that was kind of my last point, but I think I would just like to close by just saying I hope that I wanted to raise some things for everybody to start thinking about when we think about the challenges and opportunities that we have in housing. We've got some very good things happening in housing, but we've also got some challenges that we need to address going forward. Our economic development organizations like the Morgan County Economic Development Organization, the Chamber of Commerce, and others are doing a lot to grow the region and jobs, but again, we need an adequate housing supply to house that workforce. And it's also really beneficial to keep our communities thriving, right? If we don't have the right products, enough products, the right type of product, the right price product, it also hurts our communities overall and our individual citizens. So hopefully all of us together can begin to tackle some of these challenges out there. And I'd be happy to answer additional questions. And again, we'll make all the slides available and happy to dig into anything more if anybody wants to afterwards.
Now, what are your thoughts on the current state of inflation that we're experiencing that looks like it may continue for a long period of time, and the effect that it may have on the real estate market?
You know, that's a good question. I'm not sure I'm prepared to answer that since I'm not an economist. But that probably adds some added pressures overall, because you're going to see that inflation could impact the price of products that go into new construction, could impact labor prices and so forth. So I would imagine it's going to only add additional pressure to that issue. So, but I'm not sure if I answered your question again.
Do you think it could possibly slow the market and have an effect on pricing of existing homes that are for sale?
Well, I don't. I mean, I think that, again, I'm not an economist, so I don't want to wave my magic wand and say I've got all the answers. But again, we see demand is going to continue to be strong, and we've got a tremendous gap in supply that built up over 10 years of our new home construction lagging behind where it needed to be, not only here, but again across the country. And so we're not going to fill that overnight. It's going to take time to fill that gap, and that demand's going to continue to be there. So I think we're going to continue to see that pressure on the market. I don't think it'll go away. Back here.
Last week in a MIBOR meeting in Johnson County, the keynote speaker said that the legislation being discussed may be proposed for self-directed IRAs that have real estate in its holdings are going to have to be liquidated in the next couple of years. Can you speak on that?
I'm not sure that I'm as familiar with that, but I'll definitely look into that. My focus again is working more on the local level, but our state association, I'm sure, is looking into that. So I'll definitely have to find out more. So sorry, I'm not able to answer that one.
It seems like, and maybe it's not true, but it just seems like there are a lot more property management swooping in and buying houses, or Ben buys houses and all this kind of stuff, and families can't get homes because the rental managers are swooping them up. Is it just I see that, or is that the case?
No, that's a great touched on that in this. It's something that we're examining right now because we have seen a tremendous increase in the number of Wall Street investors coming into the marketplace. There's definitely a focus from some in Wall Street to invest now in homes as a commodity. And so we're seeing a lot of investors from out of state sometimes coming in and buying up a lot of property, turning them into rental property. There's nothing illegal about what they're doing, and so there's no way of kind of just putting the brakes on it, but and I'm not sure, we're interested, we're examining the property now to understand a little bit better how big of a market that is and what the impact is, because we've been hearing from a lot of our members and a lot of people looking for homes, especially on the lower end of the marketplace, that are getting beat out by these investors with cash offers. They're beating out the traditional home buyers, and so we know it's having a tremendous impact on the marketplace, but don't have enough data as of yet to really fully understand that is a factor that is starting to weigh into the marketplace. Any other questions?
With regard to that item, Indiana is one of the few states that allows out-of-state investors to do that, and so the Indiana General Assembly could rectify that particular problem if it were proven to be a large issue. And just as a side thought, I'm looking at some of these bungalow communities, just these snapshots of bungalow communities are absolutely brutal. And it appears that other communities are using this as an approach to get either people who are downsizing or people who are buying their first property.
Yeah, you could, it's possible, I think that's one of the things that it's perception of product, and sometimes we've seen in the past, there have been some examples that haven't been very good product built in our communities that have kind of resulted in tighter standards and so forth, but there are some smaller types of more affordable products that can be really high quality and really attractive in the community. So I think it's a matter of kind of getting people to keep an open mind to those things and making sure that we pay attention to the good and the bad products out there, separate out the two. But yeah, there's some great stuff out there. All right, well, thanks so much. I appreciate the opportunity. I hope some of it was informative for you today, that you'll think about some of this stuff maybe in a little bit different way than you did coming in. So feel free to reach out to me anytime. I'd be happy to share additional information with you, and look forward to seeing you again. Thanks.